Alrighty, I'm going to get started. I want to welcome everyone to our focus webinar, and welcome to everyone in all the different time zones. We really appreciate you being here. We know you have a choice in what you do with your time, and spending it with us makes us feel special. So thank you for that. A couple of disclaimers. This information is solely the property of our work here, so we're put it together for you today. Also be sure that you know that we are not here to give medical advice. Super important that you know that. We are not here to diagnose, treat, or cure anything. We're just simply sharing information. So, we love to share tools with folks, and we're so glad that you're here. We're super excited to be able to share with people who are motivated to improve their health. That just means so much to us because it's your health, right? And it really means a lot to us. We get really inspired when we see people who are interested in what their goals are, their aspirations are. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lynn Morales. I am a naturopath here in the Dallas area. My practice focuses on a modality called body talk, and also using natural therapies to address bringing balance back to the body, whether that's emotional, physical, or spiritual. And so if you do have questions, I want to share there is a chat capability. You could chime in on some questions there. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to answer questions until the end. So we'll do our best to capture those as we move forward. Just need you to know, the great news is you do not have to take a lot of notes. So you can kind of sit back and relax because you have registered for this webinar, this free webinar. At this time, you are in a great position because you are going to get the playback. And that will give you all these resources as well that we're used to put the presentation together. So I'll let you know periodically when some of those will come up, and just know that you don't have to stress over that. So, one of the biggest crucial differences between, the diagnosis of ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, versus ADD, which is Attention Deficit Disorder. And that being the one thing, along with the inability to focus and concentrate, but sufferers of ADHD also display symptoms of hyperactivity. Also described maybe as like a peak in an energy level or excess of disposable energy or nervous energy. So what is exactly ADHD? So let's firstly talk about defining some of the other symptoms. So those who suffer from ADHD and ADD are commonly described as being increasingly restless, fidgety, incapable of sitting still or maintaining focus for a long time or long periods of time. It does have a neurological and scientific basis, and there have been a lot of studies that have been dedicated to this understanding of the reasons behind these neurological imbalances. But, you might ask, well, what causes it? And there was one such study that set out to determine the difference in activity between the brains of an adult ADHD sufferer versus a non-ADHD person. And the findings were really interesting. And we're going to share a video with you, not now, but there is a video that's going to come in the resources. And one of the things it describes or talked about is this important finding, and that is that the brain of those that are diagnosed with ADHD or ADD are actually 3 to 4% smaller in certain areas, especially the frontal lobe. So that's the area, that means that things like impulse control or inhibition, concentration, they're all directly affected. And so development of the brain was also observed to be slower in those who suffered with ADHD. And further scientific findings have attributed the occurrence of ADHD with a deficiency of a very specific neurotransmitter that we call dopamine. Uh, Again, you're going to get a video that talks a little bit more about that as well. But let's move on and talk through a couple other aspects here. So, they have some drugs out there for these conditions, and amphetamine, Adderall, Ritalin. They're often prescribed for these kind of conditions. And unfortunately, it's all part of like a multi-million-dollar industry. And so it kind of makes it dependent on the continual diagnosis of people with this disorder. Or these disorders. And so the diagnosis for children with both ADHD and ADD continues to rise. I don't know if you knew that, but the requirement and the expectation for drugs to treat them is also continuing to rise. So it turns out that 11% of children in the US, or about 6.4 million, between the ages of 4 and 17, are ADHD positive. That's curious. And so it follows that many parents and caregivers for children of this age group aren't really comfortable treating them, with the drugs that are being recommended. This understanding has led to a surge of interest in natural or holistic measures to try to address these imbalances without enlisting the ongoing drug use or, and dependency. And so to properly treat the symptoms of these disorders naturally, instead of merely numbing the sensations with the drugs, it's really vital to gain an understanding on a more physiological level. So, of course, nutritional deficiencies and environmental factors are ultimately huge factors that can cause ADHD and ADD. So it's really important to address those kind of things before you seek real serious medical treatment. Naturopaths like myself, holistic health professionals, they can do assessments for ADHD or ADD, great, thorough exams looking at nutritional habits, environmental concerns. We basically recommend specific supplements as needed, or alterations in maybe a person's environment or diet, as opposed to that drug use. So, that prolonged exposure to those nutritionally boosting supplements is really important, but it has to be done at the right levels, and it has to be done over time. It's not an overnight thing when you have to deal with some of these deficiencies. So we talked a second ago about dopamine. So this is a neurotransmitter. And it's found to be, deficit in the brains of those people that have ADHD or ADD. And here's what the scientists discovered. It was due to higher concentrations of dopamine transporter. So that basically prohibits dopamine from being moved to the next neighboring cell. So it slows down, and then over time, it just reduces the overall effects of the dopamine. So the initial shift in the medical understanding of both ADHD and ADD came when scientists began to notice that hyperactivity associated with ADHD actually stemmed from a lack of ability to focus. And so bridging that gap between the diagnoses of the two, ADHD and ADD. So, dopamine, or maybe you don't know, it's known as a motivation neurotransmitter. So it actually helps to regulate emotional responses and energy release. So it follows so that, increasing levels of dopamine can actually assist in increasing overall focus and attention span. And then regulating those emotional responses so that ADHD sufferers, they find it difficult to control without, the proper levels. So dopamine is also associated with some other cognitive related disorders like anxiety, even depression. And so seeking to increase those dopamine levels is a really great way to look at treatment for this. And actually it's become really popular. So you might ask the question, well, gosh, can you increase dopamine levels naturally? And, there is a way to do it without the use of drugs. And a couple of things I'll mention from a dietary or supplementation standpoint. Limiting your sugar intake is a helpful thing for dopamine being increased. Increasing magnesium levels, also very helpful. And then overall reducing stress. Now that's, anybody's guess is how best to do that in each individual's life, right? Because stress can look a lot of different ways. And one person's stress level may look very different than another's. So I get it. Take that one with a grain of salt. That one can be tough to do. But also taking some natural supplements or amino acids like tyrosine or phenylalanine. These are amino acids that you can actually get in supplement form, but you can also find it in certain foods, bananas, eggs, beans, almonds, apples. That's a few of them. So maybe pick one out of that list that you might have liked. Another way that actually these dopamine levels can be looked at is through body talk sessions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. That's something I do here in my practice, and it can be done long distance as well via video conference. And it's something that, when you look at those dopamine levels, sometimes maybe it's not that you have a deficiency. Maybe it's like we talked about, there's receptor blockers. And what might those receptor blockers look like? Maybe it's, environment that's causing something. Maybe it's a toxicity. Maybe it's an exposure to some kind of chemical or even a former drug or hormone that you took, or could even be an active memory. There's a lot of things that can block the normal functioning of how our hormones were supposed to be transmitted across the body. So a lot of ways that you can look at this, and Body Talk's one of those that I'll mention. Now, of course, as you have a lack of dopamine in the brain, and it can cause an increase in the likelihood of inflammation in the cells. And those inflammatory things can lead to issues with thought processes and functional mobility. And one hugely effective way to combat ADHD and ADD alike is to incorporate more anti-inflammatory foods into your diet. And so inflammation is known to have two varieties, and I don't know if everybody knows this or not, so let's cover it. A type of inflammation, which is super obvious and causes pain, is in your joints or in your ability to move, right? So when you have pain, you've got inflammation. It's a given, okay? But there's another type that's a little more subtle, and it's what we call cellular inflammation. And as that name suggests, cellular inflammation happens on a cellular level. So the effects of it are much more subtle. Like right now, think about it. How many of you would know if your cells were inflamed? And when they're inflamed or swollen to be bigger than their naturally occurring size, your cells, right? It can cause a disruption in the cellular signaling. That's right. The signaling and the responses that are required to maintain the body's optimum cognitive and physical functioning. So it kind of gives inflammation like a whole new thought. Whenever you wanted to tell your doctor, I don't want to eat a different diet, maybe there was something to that in understanding what's going on in your cell at the cellular level. So, and all of these can create difficulties for those with ADHD and ADD. So an anti-inflammatory diet, it's going to promote the production of anti-inflammatory hormones. And so, you're looking at things like very rich, have it be very rich in vegetables, limited high sugar fruits, adequate, low fat protein, low in grains and starches, low in omega-6s. These are the kind of anti-inflammatory things. And omega-6s are those vegetable oils that are commonly used, or even almost every processed food. So these are the kind of things that are going to lead, and they're kind of silent. You don't even realize that you're eating them. They're in so many of our foods today. So these are the kind of things that will impact, if you don't have an anti-inflammatory diet, it's going to impact your ability to focus and be productive. And it's going to lower, your ability to not have pain and things like that. So we're going to, again, send you a nice resource on anti-inflammatory diets, so you can learn a little bit more about that. Now, gosh, it sure seems like these omega-3s are coming up all over the place. I can think of multitude of webinars we have already prepared where we have discussed omega-3s, and they're coming up again. That's because the science is proving it now. They cannot actually essential omega-3s, they're essential fats, okay? So they can't be produced actually by the body. They have to have help by food. You have to intake them with food. And they also form the basis of an anti-inflammatory reactivity. So basically, whether you use natural supplements or you increase the intake of foods naturally high in omega-3s, it's super advisable for ADHD and ADD people to increase these levels in their body to reduce all types of inflammation. And we just got done talking about the inflammation. So omega-3s are highly concentrated in the brain, super concentrated in the brain. And the elevated levels improve your overall cognitive function. And so I'm going to tell you some ways that omega-3s, some areas that you can find omega-3s, different foods. But I'm going to also let you know the studies are showing fish is the best. And I've seen that in a test that we do in my office, measuring this, where you can actually find out if your omega-3s are where they need to be or not, and what your cell inflammation is. So the omega-3 foods generally are flaxseed, nuts, leafy vegetables, but notice the fish on the slide. Super important. A lot of the research studies are showing it's actually the fish that's getting those omega-3s up to the proper levels. So whether you eat a lot of fish, I got to tell you, I don't like to eat a lot of fish, but I do take a good supplement that helps me out there. And when you've got the right levels, the research is showing it can assist with depression, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, dementia. The research is showing this now. So super important. And there's even a new study that's linking the increased levels of omega-3 fatty acids to decrease the symptoms of ADHD in young boys aged 8 to 14. And so again, there's a way that you can test this. I'm going to share that with you in a moment, but I also want to give you a couple more natural sources to aid in this whole decreasing of the cell and joint inflammation levels. Turmeric, there's some studies on turmeric, green tea, white willow bark, chili pepper, also black willow pepper. So a few more. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a video that talks about this omega-3 factor. It's super important. So we'll watch that, give you a break from listening to me, and then we'll jump into our next part of this presentation.
Optimizing the health of the brain is the future of healthcare. Brain health is the gateway to produce optimal health for the entire body. The ability to measure, track, and improve brain function and key blood biomarkers has profound implications for your overall health. BrainSpan is revolutionizing preventive brain health by providing a complete blood profile that reflects both cellular health and systemic inflammation and connects these metrics to brain function. The assessment provides vital data and education as part of a routine wellness visit for the student, athlete, mom, or business professional, or can be used to assist with the management and prevention of many specific conditions, including those of the nervous, circulatory, musculoskeletal, or immune systems. Fundamentally, all chronic disease will benefit from first optimizing the metrics critical to brain-body health. In addition, mothers and infants will reap dramatic health benefits throughout pregnancy and breastfeeding due to enhanced fetal brain development and improved maternal health. With the BrainSpan Neural Health Assessment, you will receive a detailed nutritional profile that determines cellular and inflammatory health of the brain and body, and links these areas to specific aspects of cognitive function. Valid, precise, and actionable are the hallmarks of the BrainSpan report. The Neural Health Assessment is simple yet thorough. It is generated from 2 brief steps activated from a small kit. 1. A patient-performed finger stick, providing a few droplets of blood on a card. And 2. A brief web-based cognitive function assessment on a touchscreen device. Within 2 to 3 days of processing, an electronic report is available that elegantly illustrates the status and relationships between nutrition, inflammation, and brain function. Specific information on the omega-3 index and the omega-6 omega-3 ratio, among other indices, help you avoid being in the dark when it comes to quality and quantity of specific dietary nutrients. The results of the cognitive function assessment are described to include the areas of attention, processing speed, and memory, linking them back to the nutritional metrics and specific lifestyle recommendations, making them more meaningful and motivating. A wellness summary is also provided so you can easily understand what your results really mean for you today and for your future if you don't take steps to improve it. Testing occurs at baseline, 3 months, 6 months, and then annually, ensuring the scores move and remain in the green or optimal zone. This represents the highest level of both nervous system and cellular nutritional health, providing lower levels of inflammation and improved resilience to chronic diseases, pain, and injury. Scores in the red or poor zone are associated with poor function, a high inflammatory state with possible increased risk of future diseases and premature cognitive decline. Tracking and keeping scores in the green year to year, you will improve total mind-body health and actually change the trajectory of cognitive decline over time, promoting a healthy, resilient life across your entire brain span. And this translates to an overall healthier lifespan. Lowering total body inflammation and optimizing brain function is essential for optimal health. And now, with clinically valid metrics from BrainSpan, this can be achieved with precision. BrainSpan. Measure, track, optimize. Optimizing the health of the brain is the...
Alrighty. So really neat information in that BrainSpan report. And generally speaking, depending on how well you follow protocols or your diet, they originally thought it would take 90 days to turn those scores around. They're now finding it's only taking 60. So if you're really good at following protocols and things like that, well, even if you're not, you probably need to be checking out where your scores are. Bottom line is 96% of the US population is not in a healthy omega-3 zone. So ask yourself, are you the lucky 4% or the smart 4% that's making sure your diet's doing what it needs to? So back to our focus topic. Let me focus, back on focus. Elimination diet. So, you know, this is another one of those diet plans. It gained a lot of momentum in the holistic health realm as it relates to soothing ADHD effects. And typically the elimination diet involves a person eliminating, as it states there, or removing certain types of foods, strategically based foods from their diet, and then observing the effects of it over short periods of time. So the idea behind it is simply to ascertain if the food type that you're eating is having a negative impact on your body. And then that helps determine or helps you narrow down certain foods that might be leading to allergies or intolerances or even other digestive reactions. And so the foods are are grouped like this. Generally, it's dairy products or foods that might be containing gluten, like wheat and pastas, foods that contain specific enzymes or even food colorings. Could be nuts, soy, seafood, that would be a bummer, or even citrus fruits. And so all of these are examples of foods that are responsible for common physical allergies and imbalances. And so it'd be a really safe bet or a good place to start eliminating for an ADHD person as well. And so these elimination diets, basically they are followed for about 2 to 3 weeks, which that gives the body a long enough time to adjust to life without that food. And then you let the person feel the difference of not having consumed that food in that time frame. Now, I'm gonna tell you how this really plays out is that after that 3 weeks of eliminating, let's say we were eliminating that dairy here that's on the screen. After that 3 weeks of having that out of your system, like you've gotten to a level of energy that you've been operating with for years. And you may not notice any change when you eliminate that dairy. But if dairy is a problem 3 weeks later, you bring it back into your diet, you're going to see an immediate drop in energy. You might even see huge other changes in your digestion, mucus, things like that. So sometimes it's eliminate, but you may see the result in the when the food is reintroduced, and that's the important thing to remember. Now, boy, there is so much going on with this whole gut-brain connection. It seems like everybody's jumping on this bandwagon, and it's been there all along. This isn't new, but the fact is, gut and digestive health has a huge link to the brain. I guess what's different now is they've got science to prove it. But bottom line is, it's difficult to focus if you've got digestion issues. If you've ever experienced indigestion, you know how uncomfortable it can be. It can be stress inducing. It really it can make you irritable. It can make you anxious. It can just bring on a whole host of things. So maybe somebody out there knows anyone who's suffered with celiac disease, and there's some extremes in that indigestion scenario. And even if you're not a celiac person, you've probably experienced discomfort, negative emotions, even bad moods, from a period of indigestion. So of course, it makes sense that it might impact ADHD, ADD folks as well. And the theory is that the gut bacteria is intricately linked with the brain through the nervous system, spinal cord, hormones, immune system. And there's this nerve called the vagus nerve. Yeah, kind of like Las Vegas, but not exactly. The vagus nerve, it's the main communicator between those aspects of the nervous system, spinal cord, et cetera. And it helps to transmit the neurotransmitters from the base of the spine, which happens to be conveniently located near the gut, and transmits those neurotransmitters up to the brain. So really important channel there. So it's really important that, because it further supports the fact that functional healthcare has been promoted for centuries, is that what we put in our body truly does have an effect on the way our mind works, our feelings of positivity or negativity that we experience. It supports the theories that certain foods and their benefits or disadvantages towards promoting happiness and decreasing anxiety. So there's endless benefits to this understanding, and mainly being that it gives us a better idea of which foods to eat, to expect a larger surge of positive emotions, or at the very least, which foods to avoid. That's the important thing there. So again, we're going to share a couple of research studies on the gut-brain relationship, gut health in general, effects of the gut-brain relationship on health, and then foods that promote positive digestion. All these are going to be in your resource links, so you don't have to worry about taking notes there. So flow state, it's a new term, but boy, it comes up a lot lately. We've talked about it in some prior education series as well. And basically, it's coined to define a state of creative and productive focus, where a person actually slips into that undistracted state of intense concentration without completing, or while they're completing a task. And ultimately, it's the complete opposite sensation to the state of constant stimulation and distraction experienced by an ADHD person. Flow states definitely, it's not new. Humans have been creating and focusing, in flow state since time began, but recent developments in technology have damaged, this is important, our attention span and our ability to focus has recently drawn awareness back to the importance of this flow state. So perhaps that's why flow state's coming up so much. And I've seen it in a number of our presentations that we've researched for these webinars, and have come up with some interesting things there on the importance of that flow state. And it can be measured on both a personal level and yet also on an overall level of health and well-being. And neuroscience has proven that those who engage in flow state more regularly actually have overall higher levels of happiness and a sense of balance in life, probably a sense of accomplishment, and helping them feel like they're, making a difference or having a purpose. So in terms of the ADHD and ADD factor here, there have been some studies to show that it's not uncommon for individuals who suffer from these issues to flourish intently in particular areas of interest. So instead of being praised as an artist's entrance into flow state, would be, however, those with ADHD experience a more linear or less controlled version that's sometimes labeled hyperfocus. And this can involve often involuntary periods of focus on tasks that may or may not be very productive outlets for their extra energy or their irrational or unfocused energy. So, how do you find your flow state? It's important. The findings of some of the articles that we're going to share with you suggest that although those with ADHD find it impossible to focus on other more trivial and fleeting aspects of life and responsibilities, they do in fact possess the potential and the ability to complete tasks. They just lack ability to direct the energy. So we encourage the use of, more natural methods to gain clarity over the individual's own mind and ability to harness that energy, which can get so easily misdirected. So the awareness, that needs to be cultivated around this can be done in several ways. It differs from person to person, though. But let's go through a few things that may be helpful. So incorporating daily mindfulness, meditation, yoga techniques, these are all helpful. These activities help draw awareness to one's mental state, their emotions, their thought patterns. They can be invaluable skills for those people who suffer with ADHD. So notice, when especially if you're like working with a child or your interest in this right now is related to a child, notice when they're at their most focused or productive time, and take note of the, things like, well, what are they doing when they seem so focused? Who are they with? What environment are they in? What have their activity levels been like that day? What are their recent eating habits that day? How would you rate their overall mood, their satisfaction, their anxiety levels? These are all really important pieces of information that can help you with determining patterns for improving their state and their flow state specifically. So, we just did another class called Expanding Your Emotional Vocabulary. So this is just going to be one small aspect of that, but you can find that class out on our website with many others that we've done. But in particular, I'll share a little bit, and then if you want to search on expand your emotional vocabulary on our website, you can find that other webinar. So basically, emotional intelligence, it's key. If we're to expect an ADHD person to become capable of processing, thoughts and emotions, it's one thing to become aware of their imbalances or irrationality, but it's another thing entirely to put steps in place to help them overcome or gain control. So emotional intelligence is something that can be significantly improved over time, which allows it to be categorized in the sphere of holistic treatment. But it's proven, and we're going to share a link where you can learn more about that. Lots of links on this, actually, that having high levels of emotional intelligence contributes to overall competency in their work, as well as heightened levels of security in their relationships. So in terms of ADHD and many other related physiological disorders, which can be treated holistically, improving emotional intelligence can only serve to help the individual become more aware of their thoughts and their emotions. And then this in turn is going to help them to implement strategies to overcome difficulties or imbalances when they arise. And again, it's all about awareness. I cannot stress enough awareness, how important it is. So, there have been suggestions to imply that those with ADHD have lower levels of emotional maturity. And as such, it follows that increasing these levels would have a more positive impact on them. So what we're going to do is, in the links we're going to share with you, you can actually take a test to determine your current level of emotional intelligence and ways that you can increase it and improve it. And of course, you can also watch that other webinar that we did recently. Good old music, right? It's a great way to have a natural drug-free remedy to improve symptoms of ADHD. There are people that, who struggle to focus and concentrate. And when they've got that music therapy, so to speak, it kind of helps to keep them on track. And there's actually music therapy studies, and they've shown that parts of the brain are activated by hearing certain frequencies. Now that makes total sense. But also certain rhythms of music are associated with that overall areas of focus to help them complete a task. So many adults with ADHD have reported that playing kinds of music while trying to study or engage in another project helps them be more productive. I can remember in my corporate America days knowing some programmers, and they'd have their little earphones on while they sat there, programming, and that's how they focused, and they stayed focused, and they did a great job. But how exactly does this work? So let's talk about that. So the rhythm and the structure that the music provides is actually really soothing to ADHD brains that are struggling to process thoughts and mental patterns. So it can actually help to regulate the thoughts and make them that little bit more linear. And as is typical, well-structured piece of music has a clear beginning and a middle and an end. And it doesn't get, they don't get sidetracked, or it doesn't get sidetracked by or distracted by a million different external factors. And so that's why it's helpful for ADHD people, because they are distracted. It kind of keeps them on track. But guess what else music does? It fires up synapses in the brain that are associated with dopamine levels. Now, we talked about the importance of dopamine, right? So a vital hormone, required for that regulation of the ADHD mental pattern. So there are a number of different frequencies and styles that people have found to work for calming ADHD. It differs for everybody, but it's worth taking time to test out different pieces of music and frequencies before, settling in on just one. I know I do work better when I have music that doesn't have words in it. Um, I've seen that effect in my own world. It helps me just to be more productive. So anyway, some interesting food for thought. Well, what would a presentation be without going green, right? Um, you know, there's a study that was done on ADHD that focused on measuring the benefits of increasing a person's exposure to green area. That's right. Or outdoor activity, another word for it. And the results were fascinating. It stated that the instances of hypertension and hyperactivity were significantly reduced in those exposed to green forest and areas in nature over a period of time. And so it's a recommendation now that they make for children dealing with ADHD. And so a few other recommendations that they're giving to parents now is to increase that outdoor activity levels. Now think about it. How many people or children are on their phones nowadays, right? They're like sitting inside. They don't want to go out and play. They have to have like commercials to tell you to go out and play. It's crazy. Because they're so interested in the video games and all those other things that are giving their brain like overstimulation. So putting them outside, helping them touch nature, actually walking barefoot has incredibly grounding properties. Walking barefoot outside in the grass, it's very good for calming. So just a couple of things, and where possible, try to move indoor activities into those greener outdoor spaces. Everything doesn't have to be done. Now, I know right now it's a bit hot. I know it's September, but it's a bit hot in Texas still. So doing things outside isn't as pleasant, but maybe earlier in the morning or later after the sun goes down. And also getting some sun. Man, that is a very good idea. We did a different class webinar on Sleep 101, talked about the importance of getting some sun and the importance of getting some of that technology out of your face before bedtime. And so again, all those stimulants that we think are helping us, but in reality, some of this technology, while it does help in many ways, a physical standpoint, it's actually taking a toll on many people. So another thing to think about, we're talking about environmental factors. Controlling that home environment is really important. And there's things you can do to calm the nervous system, calm that home environment. Essential oils we're going to talk about in a second, diffusing them in the home. Also decluttering sounds, things that make a lot of noise, or actually decluttering in general. Have you ever got the urge to like clean out a closet you haven't cleaned out in a gazillion years and you just felt so good when it was done? That's super important. And there really was a real life physical effect on your body when you did that cleaning. It was like a cleansing. So super important to clean out the house, help the environment not look so cluttered. So I'm going to talk about some essential oils. I know we mentioned briefly here autism, but we're really focused on the ADHD, ADD piece. But I'm just going to run through 10 essential oils. You can take notes on this, write the names down. Frankincense oil, really good for helping to stay focused. It helps to also reduce stress reactions and negative emotions. Vetiver oil, V as in Victor, Etiver. In 2001, there was a study done by a Dr. Terry Friedman, and it actually revealed that vetiver oil was beneficial in treating ADHD. So interesting. And he actually found it was good for young children and teenagers. So it's a really relaxing oil, calming properties that go with it, helpful for concentrating and for kids that are distracted or impatient. Sandalwood oil, also very relaxing and calming. They actually have found that to be effective with autistic kids. Cedarwood oil, also effective for autism and ADHD, calming and relaxing properties. But here's the neat thing about this one. The scent actually promotes the release of serotonin. And serotonin is then converted into melatonin in the brain. So that actually helps with peaceful sleep. And again, Sleep 101 class we already did, talked a lot about some of those hormones. How about lavender? Well, everybody's heard of lavender, right? Great calming effect, reducing anxiety and emotional stress. Now here's another one, mandarin oil. Did you know that actually helps with insomnia? But also, it's pretty helpful for gut issues. So we've talked about gut brain, right? It's very helpful for leaky gut syndrome. So it can also help reduce anxiety levels. And the neat things is when it comes to kids, they're pretty fond of that citrus scent. So not bad there. And don't forget good old peppermint. You know, peppermint's really good for autism and ADHD because it supports it because it's got a cooling sensation. And so it has a calming effect on the body, but it also helps to improve that mental focus. And then we have another oil called ylang ylang, Y-L-A-N-G. Effective sedative, actually. Really positive effect on human emotions. And you know what else it does? It increases the blood flow to certain parts of the body. So what it can do is it can relieve inflammation and help that function of the cardiovascular and digestive systems. We talked about the importance of that inflammation piece. Bergamot, it's an excellent mood enhancer. It can be exceptional for autism, and it helps to create feelings of joy, freshness, energy, because it also improves the circulation of the blood. So super important there. Calming effect to help reduce stress and anxiety. And our last oil for this moment, chamomile. There actually was a study. So this is a good one for stress and anxiety. They did a study that was published, Alternative Therapies in Health and Medicine and Pharmacology Review, about inhaling chamomile, which actually promotes relaxation. So awesome set of essential oils. If you don't know how to get your hands on good quality essential oils, reach out to us. We can help you locate those. So traditional Chinese medicine, I sometimes shorten that to TCM. I know it looks kind of scary with those needles. They actually don't hurt. I had a brave little kitty once. He went to see his holistic vet. He had 15 acupuncture needles in him at one time, sleeping like a baby. He loved it. So they actually can be extraordinarily helpful. And, many of the holistic measures that are used for treating ADHD stem from like century-old things like Chinese medicine. And so like even the ancient naturopaths, like way in the old days, they, would soothe the ailments in the villages, with Chinese medicine. There's something they call the elements, grouping of the elements, the 5 elements. If you've ever been in my office, you've seen them. I've got a chart on my wall that talks about the 5 elements. They are the following: fire, wood, earth, water, and metal. All of us have aspects of these 5 elements in us. And the interesting thing is, and you're going to have to hear about this study because this is fascinating, but they talk about the identification with one another of these elements and how it corresponds to the way an individual manifests and acts out or acts within their world. So actually Chinese medicine attests that for any imbalance within these elements, like these 5 elements should all be perfectly balanced. And when they're not, you'll see mental, physical, emotional, or even spiritual issues that will surface. And so it's a helpful way to bring that balance back. And so everyone, contains all of the elements to some extent. And so when there's an imbalance, it can lead to particular dominance in one or another element. And it leads to these extreme behaviors and thought patterns that would be diagnosed in Western medicine as ADHD. So I got to tell you about this guy, though. There's a pediatrician in New York. His name is Dr. Cowan. We're going to provide the links. He actually uses TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, in his treatment with kids with ADHD. And let me tell you about what he concluded. This was fascinating. The drugs that Western medicine has publicized for treatment only have an effect on children of certain element dominances. So we just talked about the elements. So fire, earth, metal, water, wood, right? So if a child has a tendency towards one of those more strongly than others, the actual medications may not work, or the right medication needs to be, prescribed. That's why some doctors go, well, we'll try this one first. And then if that doesn't work, well, we'll try that one. Well, that's what this guy concluded. He found that out, and he goes, no, if we find the right one that supports the right Chinese medicine element, then won't have to guess going forward which medicine they would need. So of course he wasn't a proponent of the medicine, but that's a pretty shocking revelation. And one of the things that he looked at was also combining in diet, nutritional recommendations, acupuncture. He even brought in guided imagery and some other mind-body techniques. So I thought that was fascinating to hear what he was doing and how he found that overall experience of understanding how the pharmaceutical prescription worked and fit into the Chinese medicine realm. That's huge. I was really impressed with what this guy was doing. Now, I was going to share, we're not going to watch this video. This is a longer video, but I do want to let you know, we're going to send you this link. It's a presentation on Body Talk, healthcare designed by your body, because everybody is unique. And why am I bringing that up? Because that doctor just told us why. Because each body has a different level. Each of you on this webinar has a different level of understanding, a different level of fire element versus water versus wood. And so this can actually, that aspect of Chinese medicine can actually be balanced with Body Talk, and you don't have to use the needles. So I just thought I would mention that to you. And then we'll send you this link so you can learn a little bit more about that. Body Talk can be performed long distance. So even if you're in a different time zone, that's not an issue. Yoga, mindfulness, meditation, they have become increasingly popular for physical and mental health. And so, what's a presentation these days without mentioning those, right? On natural health. They're really good for relieving symptoms of ADHD. So mindfulness and meditation, they aim to anchor the mind into the present moment and encourage the strengthening of overall self-awareness. So it follows that these effects could potentially help with alleviating the symptoms of ADHD. But, many treatments focus on children and alleviating these early signs. And mindfulness is a way to do it. And it's good because it can be implemented at any age or effective at any age. But the goal, of becoming aware of one's thoughts and the habitual thought patterns is merely the first step. And with ADHD, it can become increasingly frustrating to redirect or even change these habitual thoughts once awareness has been gained. So mindfulness, has definitely caused a stir in the world of adult ADHD treatments. The meditation stimulates and strengthens the response in the brain, which deals with focusing attention and regulating emotions, two of the most problematic symptoms of ADHD people. But many first-time meditators on that ADHD spectrum find that it's a difficult thing to do with this kind of treatment, and that regular practice or intent is required to see these results, and it rarely becomes evident in one or two sessions. And so, they might give up kind of easily or get frustrated. So that's kind of the difficulty, is beginning with mindfulness. But it can be helpful if you're committed to the practice. So we're going to share a link with you on that as well. So, we're almost done here. So if you do have questions, now might be a time to put those in the chat. So we're just about finished. What I do want to do is share with you a couple of upcoming events that may be of interest. Our next live event is actually almost here. It will be on Saturday, September 21st. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, do not miss this. I call this Body Talk Access class the Swiss Army Knife of Wellness. Have your tools ready anytime, anywhere. It doesn't require supplements. It doesn't require equipment. It doesn't require electricity. You're going to learn it in one day, use it for a lifetime. I'll share a quick story. A couple years ago, I was on vacation after an extraordinarily stressful time. I found myself doing something relaxing like rock climbing, which I never do and was not relaxing. And it was in the middle of summer and it was in Sedona and it was hot. And I went to climb this high rock and had very little water. I had already been out in the sun for a few days. And by the way, did I say I don't rock climb? I don't climb anything. I just don't do that. So here I was trying to be relaxed and it wasn't relaxing at all. And in fact, I started to get rather nervous going up the rock, scaling it higher. I was about halfway and thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing up here? And I was like, well, I can either keep climbing up and find my husband and like cry for help, or I had to go down by myself. So I got the courage and told myself, no, I'm going to go up and find him and have him help me get down. And when I got to the top, it occurred to me, maybe I should tap out my Body Talk Access routine. So I did the first 5 steps here. I had a little bit of water left so I could hydrate my tissues. I got through the process and went, oh my gosh, I felt like a new woman. I got my courage back. I actually started to kind of skip down the rocks. Well, it felt like it anyway. I was skipping in my heart. I was excited and grateful I didn't have to do step 6, fast aid procedure, because that would have meant I had a serious injury and I didn't. So I didn't have to do that one. But phenomenal technique. So, if you're in the Bahamas right now and you don't have electricity and you can't find your essential oils or your supplements, or you can't get to equipment, you'd have some tools. This is invaluable. So just sharing that with you. And next month's webinar, yes, Arm Yourself Against Cancer. We're going to be going over that topic. I'm going to share with you, if you cannot make it on that date, please register anyway, because then you'll get the playback. If you register, you get the free playback and the slides and, all of the resources that are used. So I can't encourage you enough to register. You can do that on the web page that's listed here on the slide. It's also actually listed on accesscompletewellness.com homepage. Scroll all the way down. You'll see all of our upcoming events. And we have many, many, many more of those coming for the new year, of course, in 2020, but also a lot of live events coming up. I'm encouraging you to check out those as well. So that is what I have to share. And I'll ask if there are any questions briefly. I don't think I see any, but I'm going to look. And if I don't see any at this time. So just want to thank you all so much for attending and being a part of our webinar experience. We know you have an opportunity to do a lot of things with your time. And the fact that you thought it was important to share it with us right now means an awful lot to us. So thank you so much. And we appreciate all of you and look forward to our next time together. Thank you.